Vino. Long drag up the Turchino characterizes the early part of the route before they make the right turn onto the coast. And then those several little stinger hills that will definitely make things difficult for the riders. Taken individually, none of them is particularly demanding. But at the end of 300 kilometers, I can tell you that Poggio is going to feel very, very difficult indeed. These the sights of the main peloton, chasing a group of 7 riders that have been out front since kilometer 15. And 6 minutes and 40 seconds the advantage that the 7 riders up front are currently enjoying. Was up just over 10 minutes for those 7 riders. I'll run the rule over them very shortly, but this is the scene as the riders are on slick roads. They've hit the rain. They had a little bit of hail on the Turchino, and now they've arrived into steady rain on the coast, and it's likely that that's what they're going to have to contend with right the way through to the finish. Cannondale team on the front, setting the pace for Peter Sagan, as many expected that they would do, and it's likely that they're going to make big efforts up front when they hit the next climbs of the Tre Capi and then into the Cipressa. 7 riders up front. Matteo Bono is there for Lampre, Nathan Haas for Garmin, Nicola Bohem for Bardiani Valvoli, Antonio Parinello for Androni Giocattoli, Marta Cellinghi of the Belkin squad, Jan Barta of NetApp, Mark Demar of United Healthcare. Nathan Haas on the front. There's the Cervella, and out of 6 riders, so I've just got to see which one of those 7 has been shelled on the descent of the Turchino. Those are the 7 riders that did venture forth from the peloton after 15 kilometers. They covered 47.5 kilometers in the first hour of racing, so they weren't hanging around, playing their way into this race gently. This is going to be an arduous test of endurance and physical aptitude, and I think the willingness to suffer in very, very difficult conditions. It's going to be a tense race down there for those riders as well in these conditions. Okay, we're going to get our first of a few breaks out of the way, but please do join us after this short commercial break, and we'll be bringing you a little bit closer to Sanremo, the first big monument of the season. It's the 105th Milan Sanremo, and the first monument of the season. The first big classic race. 6 riders out front at the moment, piling on towards Sanremo in the rain, heading towards, well, there might be a little bit of sunshine before the end, because there's big clouds up in the sky. There's a bit of sunshine up there as well, so the conditions have been changeable throughout the day. They've finally hit the torrential rain. They had a little bit of a flurry of hail on the Turchino Pass, as we see 6 riders out front, and this is the peloton chasing behind. The combined forces of Cannondale, Giant Shimano and Trek Factory Racing are doing the legwork on the front. Well, 3 riders, one from each of those 3 teams, that is taking on the work of keeping these riders in check. We've lost Nicola Bohem from the break. Matteo Bono is up front for Lampre, Nathan Haas for Garmin Sharp, Antonio Parinello for Androni Giocattoli, Martin Cellinghi from Belkin, Jan Barta from Team NetApp, and Mark Demar from United Healthcare. Those are the 6 riders up front. They've been out front since kilometer 15. Maximum advantage just over 10 minutes. That's down to just around about 6.5 minutes at the moment. They're charging on as best they can, but the bunch are slowly but surely steadily reeling them in, and their chances of hanging on to the finish look a little bit difficult at this moment. A quick reminder, you can reach us on Twitter this afternoon at DQ Sport is the Twitter handle, hashtag Eurosport Cycling, and please do get in touch. Alongside me is a man who's taken victory in this race on 2 occasions, and in 11 appearances in Milan Sanremo, Sean Kelly was only out of the top 7 on 2 occasions. Amazing consistency and amazing ability to convert it into wins. I'll save his blushes by finishing that. We've a tweet in, Sean, and I'm just trying to see. Yeah, Edwin Squires asking, Italian roads always look slicker and shinier in the rain. Perhaps Sean Kelly would care to comment on Italian road surfaces. It does look treacherous out there, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. It does become treacherous when you get the wet conditions, and unfortunately it looked like the forecast was going to be good. We're coming from the 2 stage races which lead as preparation for the Milan Sanremo, Paris-Nice. Torino Atletico. Fabulous weather. It's going to be difficult even though we're through the worst conditions, because the Torino is the one where it does get cold, because you go to an altitude of 532 metres. At least we're very close to sea level now. We're just hugging the coast along all the way to Sanremo, so it's not going to be majorly cold. But as we can see here, a lot of the riders have gloves on, they're well wrapped up, so that tells us the temperatures are pretty low all the time, and it will affect a lot of riders. And of course, when you get close to 300 kilometres in the wet conditions, you're going to suffer in the end. And the roads, they're going to take so much risk coming off of the Capas, especially the final climb of the day, the Poggio, Cipressa. Well, that's always going to be dangerous. The wet conditions will make it very, very nervous for everybody.
You were pretty nifty on the descent, most notably, of course, in that 1992 victory. But I mean, how difficult and how treacherous are those roads on the descent, especially with wet weather?
Well, when you're really pushing to the limit, that's when it always gets dangerous. And of course, in the wet conditions, when you slide, there's very little possibility of correcting it. When you're on a dry road, if you get a little bit of a slide, you can correct it. But when it slides off in the wet, you're down, and that's it. And with the way the weather conditions looking in Milano, in Sanremo, it's not going to be all dry for the end of the race, and that is going to make it very, very dangerous. And I think it will undoubtedly we'll have to have some spills.
Well, let's run the rule over the teams. At the top of the show, on the introductory piece, you saw mention of some of the major favourites: John Degenkolb, Peter Sagan, Fabian Cancellara, Vincenzo Nibali. These are the big names that have come to this race. Philippe Gilbert perhaps honing his fitness and ready to make a big comeback to the world of top-level cycling, or in terms of taking victories at least. But perhaps any little outsiders that you have your eye on, or any riders? Is there anyone that can prevent the likes of Degenkolb, Cancellara et al. From being involved?
Well, I think first of all you have to look at the men who were there in the past in the classics, and the Cancellara, Sagan comes into mind immediately, and then you start looking at recent form. Nibali, for example, last year he was very active, but this year he doesn't seem to be going so well. So, will he be as active in the final of this one? Pozzato there is the one who was, always there or thereabouts in the race, and he likes this race. And then you have to come down to the sprinters, and Sagan is included in that list, and then you have Greipel, of course, and you have Cavendish, of course, who has shown great form in the end of Torino, which is a good pointer. You have Degenkolb, Alexander Kristoff, Edward Bosenhagen, all of those guys, I think, are in there with a chance at the moment. But the conditions are going to make it that much more difficult. And it all depends the way they race in the end, because if they really race on the Capos and then they go on to the Cipressa and really race aggressively, it's going to be difficult for the sprinters. We've seen the past number of years, sprinters, sometimes they get through, and when you look at the winner in the past 10 years, we had quite a few sprinters who managed to get through, but in general it's normally a smaller group, and the wet conditions is going to make it that bit more difficult for the sprinters to get through, because they will have the sore legs in the end. As we can see, it's raining very heavily here at the moment, but there's at the moment you can name 10 riders definitely in there with a chance. And Philippe Gilbert looking in good form in the Torino Atletico. He's the one who has to attack, so you have the guys who want to go on the attack like Cancellara, and then you have the guys who want to follow and just wait for the sprint.
6 riders up front, 86 kilometres remaining for these riders, and you saw every one of his 36 years etched on the face of Martin Cilingi from the Belkin squad in the green colours on the front of the group at the moment. The elder statesman of this 6-rider group, and I think really feeling every single kilometre in his legs. And these are tough moments for these riders. I suppose in one way they'll be delighted to be out front and away from the nervousness that'll be really being felt by many of the riders in the peloton. But look at the way the peloton is strung out in one big long line. They're really charging down and closing down the gap on these 6 riders up front. Cannondale, Trek and Giant Shimano doing all the work to bring them back. We're going to take another break. We'll be back to you after this short break. Just over 80 kilometres to go in Milan Sanremo, the first big classic of the season. Il Classicissima, or Il Primavera, depending on which nickname you prefer. It is almost 300 kilometres of racing for the riders today, 294 to be specific, and the bunch is being towed along at the moment by Cannondale as they attempt to close down the breakaway group that had a maximum of just over 10 minutes advantage. That's down to just around about 6 minutes and 45 seconds. 6 riders up front: Matteo Bono of Lampre Merida, Nathan Haas of Garmin Sharp. Nicola Bohm was in there for a while for Bardiani Valvoli, although he's been shelled. Antonio Paranello's in there for Androni Giocattoli. Martin Chilinghi of the Belkin squad, Jan Barta of Team NetApp and NetApp Endura, and Mark DeMar of United Healthcare. And NetApp Endura taking the opportunity to combine towards the head of the field. They're not contributing to the chase, but they're making sure they're staying up front. They have more of a tailwind than a headwind, I think is probably the way to describe it. Not a massive amount of wind out there today. Plenty of rain, as you can see on your screen. And these are, it's going to be a challenging day for the riders. The wind, and the rain, the wetness will really get into their bones. We've tweeted into @DQ Sport. Someone's asking about which riders does this suit and which riders does it particularly not suit. And there is a case where some riders just physically aren't able to cope with it. It's not that they don't want to, they just shut down, don't they?
Yes, well, some riders not supporting it well, and I think the problem is with the race they've had of recent, which I mentioned the early part of our programme. You know, the good conditions is difficult to adapt over a long distance, and they are going to be out there for almost 300 kilometres today. They've had it on the Torcino, so you know they're going to get cold as the race go on, and there's riders who will not be supporting that well. And it's not always the case that a rider that he can support it. Another time he doesn't support that well. It's just the way the body reacts. But I think Degenkolb was the one who was a real solid rider, and he seems to take the weather conditions doesn't bother him at all. As the sprinters go, maybe some of the other sprinters not like it as much. And then the other favourites, of course, we see last year, they survived it. Sagan, Cancellara, the big favourites. I think they will be able to do that once again today.
I suppose the riders with a bit more meat on their bones are probably more likely to be able to endure this. Mark DeMar, United Healthcare rider, was on the outside. Actually, the one on the inside was Jan Barta, a little bit closer to the camera as the riders roll through the shot there. They bunch behind, chasing hard. We did get a shot of Orica GreenEdge. I can tell you that Simon Gerrans, who won this race a couple of years ago, has had to cry off sick. He was pulled from their roster just last night. He's currently unwell, and that's a great disappointment for the Aussie. They've won 2 of the last 3 events, of course. Matthew Harley-Goss, another man who's not able to take up his place with Orica GreenEdge today. So the likelihood is that they'll be pitching their hopes on Michael Matthews, the man they call Bling, under 23 world champion a few years ago. And Michael Matthews, a great sprinter. If he gets over those hills, he could be in with a shout. And there's been so much talk about the route, Sean, about whether the removal of the Pompiano climb and how critical that is. It's come back to a course that you're very familiar with, because this is pretty much the route that was used from 1982 through to 2008 with the Trecapi, well, the Torcino, the Trecapi, and then the Cipressa, and then the Poggio, and then you had a slightly shorter run off the final hill, but it's pretty much the same one. How do you think the race will play out?
Well, I think it's going to be really difficult for the sprinters to get through. We've seen the last years the Cipressa and Poggio, that's where the real difficulty occurs, and the sprinters, they hang on the Cipressa, and then the Poggio, they just pay the price. And I think with the easier route this year, it's going to be the same situation. Also, the weather conditions are going to make it that little more difficult again. So it's now a question of how many of the sprinters will make it through in the leading group. Will there be anybody there as big sprinters? That is the question. And looking at the Paris-Nice, the Torino, the Latico, Degenkolb was the one who was in really good shape. He's the one of sprinters who can get through the climbs better. I think he should be there today, but there will be a lot of the other ones who will not survive.
I suppose the question for a lot of viewers from this part of the world is, will Mark Cavendish make it over those hills? Is his form good enough? Would you have a bet on him?
I think it's going to be difficult for Cavendish, looking at his form, although he did come good in the end of Torino, winning a stage. I'd be a little bit concerned with the weather conditions. If he got the good conditions, the right conditions, well then there would be a chance he'd do it. But with the weather conditions, the way it's been earlier on in the day and now the way it's turning out, I think it's going to be difficult for him. But we know Cavendish, once he's really up for it, when he's motivated, and we've been hearing since he won the stage in Torino that he was really looking forward to the Milan Sanremo. If he is big motivation, well then he's capable of doing it, but we'll have to just wait and see.
And Jill wants to know whether anyone from Team Sky has a chance. Bit of a surprise that Ian Stannard, wonderful sixth place finish last year, was really involved in the close of that race. It's a bit of a surprise that he's not part of their lineup.
Yes, very surprising. He has a real good performance last year. He was the one with Chavanel that went away before the Poggio and held on real well. And of recent times we see him in the Newsblad in the open race in Belgium. He performed so well in the horrible conditions. Surprising to see him out of the team. And Bosenhagen is the one I think you have to look at now. He's the one capable of getting over the hills, and he can do it in the sprint.
Eddie Boss, the go-to guy for Team Sky. Still 6 riders up front. Their advantage now just about 6.5 minutes as they race towards Sanremo. We'll be back after this short break. It's Milan Sanremo, the first big one-day classic of the season, the 105th edition of this race that's been running since 1907. Orica GreenEdge riders really suffering in the rain, as indeed are all the bunch. Riders doing everything they can to try and get a little bit of warmth into those muscles. The legs, of course, won't be feeling too cold, but pretty much every other part of their body really suffering. This man, Antonio Parinello, has been back to his team car a few moments ago to take off his jacket, so it looks as if the weather is improving for the riders out there, but it's likely that it could change again between now and the finish. We've had rain, sunshine, just about every kind of weather condition at the finish line so far today in Sanremo as the riders make their way towards the next big rendezvous. They've got the Tre Capi, the Capo Mele, Capo Cervo, Capo Berta. Those 3 little bumps, they wouldn't individually be all that difficult, but taken together, add in a couple of 100 kilometers of bike racing, and they'll feel very testy indeed. And they come before the Cipressa, which is crested with 22 kilometers remaining, and then the Poggio. The famed Poggio is the final ascent, and that is reached with 6.1 kilometers to go. Fabian Cancellara, one of the big favourites, 2008 winner on Milan Sanremo, is going back to his car, so obviously he feels that hostilities relatively neutralized at the moment. So while they're closing down the gap to the break, 6.5 minutes was the last time check that we had. Fabian Cancellara feels comfortable in going back to his car for a bit of a chat, perhaps to collect some more refreshment. 6 riders up front continuing to slog on towards Sanremo. This race, which has been an absolutely key part of the sporting culture of Italy since 1907. Like in 1946, this race took place the day after King Victor Emmanuel III decided to abdicate. So that was a difficult moment in Italian politics. 24 hours later, Fausto Coppi launched a 150-kilometer solo attack that led to him taking victory in what was the 37th Milan Sanremo. 14 minutes his advantage by the time the second rider came in. And the famous radio commentator Niccolo Carosio fell back on the time-honoured broadcaster's ruse. He said, well, first across the line is Fausto Coppi, and now while we wait for the other riders to finish, here's some light music. Well, I don't think that's going to happen today. 6 minutes and 6 is what we're hearing in our ears, is the gap between the 6 riders up front and the break and the bunch behind. There's plenty of riders working their way back up to the group, having been back to the team cars, and this sort of ferrying will be going on all day. Mark Jeremy says Stannard would have loved these conditions. Real shame he isn't riding today. He's concentrating on Paris-Roubaix and Milan Sanremo. So the Team Sky squad believe that that's the smart thing to do. We've got a sight there of Mark Cavendish. He's got He's got a gilet that has the British champion colours, or else perhaps a see-through gilet. I think it's probably the former. Pippo Pozzato, former winner of this race back in 2006. And as we heard in our intro to the programme, a man who really loves this event. Been on the podium on several occasions, always seems to know where to be and how to come up with it. How do you win at Milan Sanremo, Sean? There's been so much discussion over the past week, and so much of it generated by the removal of the Pompiana climb, the fact that Limani is not there. It's back to the traditional route. Many people say, well, it's a cast iron certain bunch sprint because they've taken out those. But in your day, well, it didn't always end up in a bunch sprint. I think your 2 victories were from small groups. And, you know, I think, you know, how it's also been said that this is an easy race to get around, but it's a very, very difficult race to win.
Yes, well, it's one of the easier ones of the major classics, like when you see a Tour of Flanders or the Paris-Roubaix or a Liège-Bastogne-Liège, a Tour of Lombardy. You have so much hills to climb in Liège, Lombardy. Then in the Flanders-Roubaix, there's so many cobblestones, 50 kilometres of cobblestones in the Paris-Roubaix. There's, you know, very few riders at the start of Paris-Roubaix who can win. You can pick out maybe, you know, 8 riders capable of winning it, unless it's from a breakaway, of course, which gets many minutes ahead. But this one is a relatively easier one, but it's a bit of a lottery because there's so much fighting, and you have to be a bit lucky as well, because many crashes, and I remember in my time, you know, you have crashes at the wrong time before you get to the Cipressa and the Poggio. If you're caught up in a crash, then you lose out so well. But you know, how do you win a Milan Sanremo? You have to be able to ride 294 kilometres first, and that is the problem a lot of riders are not capable of doing. They can ride to 200, 220, but to be competitive in the final 30-40 kilometres of a 290 plus kilometre race, you know, there's not a lot of riders capable of doing that at the rate those guys will be going, so that's what makes it difficult. And of course, Cipressa and Poggio are not the most difficult climbs. It's the speed that they go up them at in the very final, and if you're really good, you're really on a good shape and you're on a good day, well, then you can get through, and even the sprinters can get through, as we have seen in the past. But you know, it's more so of a puncher, you know, a real strong rider that get through in this race. And if you look back at the records, you know, just of recent, Sagan, who can get over climbs very well, Chavanel, Cancellara, those guys can do it, but will the sprinters be able to do it today? That is the question.
That is the question. Peter Sagan, perhaps many people's tip. We'll see how he gets on a little bit further into this race. We're going to get another break out of the way, but please do join us again after these. Welcome back. We're heading towards the end game of Milan Sanremo 2014. The Capo Meli next up for the riders. Capo Cervo, Capo Berta, then the Cipressa and the Poggio. Those are the big challenges for the sprinters. Can they get across those climbs and make sure that they have the legs to produce the sprint that they need on the Lungomare Italo Calvino in Sanremo at the end of 294 kilometres of racing? We're down to 5 riders up front from the initial 7. Nicola Bohem of Bardiani Valvoli got dropped quite a while ago. We've lost Nathan Haas in the last few kilometres to a puncture, so he's chasing behind. Not sure whether he'll persevere with that, whether he can get back to these riders. It's going to be a bit of a challenge for the 25-year-old Aussie. His 3rd year with Garmin, 5th in the GC of Tour Down Under this year. Took a stage and 4th in GC in Herald Sun Tour, so he's obviously going well. So Nathan Haas somewhere behind these 5 riders up front. The Belkin rider Martin Cilingi, 36 years of age now, the Dutchman. As we see behind the bunch, riders are taking on capes, black rainwear for the Orica GreenEdge squad. Plenty of tweets coming into @DQ Sport, #Eurosport Cycling. Let's see if I can find it. Neil Kerr says, why can't the UCI insist all rain jackets should be either clear or bare team insignia? Difficult to make teams out in bad weather. Well, don't get me going. It's one of my bugbears. That's one of my favourite topics. But currently, one of the favourite materials for using for making rain capes at the moment. It's slippery. It's much tighter and more aerodynamic. Is actually it's pretty much impossible to screen print onto it. So a lot of the teams are using those that black material. Cilingi slugging away on the front for Team Belkin, the green colours. The Androni Giocattoli representative in this breakaway is Antonio Paranello, the 25-year-old Italian. 5th in GP della Atrusci this year, so obviously going pretty well. 4th in Roma Maxima as well, part of that big group that just failed to catch Alejandro Valverde on the line in Rome. Clearly Paranella has good form, won GP Festa del Perdano in 2011 as the riders arrive in the feed zone. The breakaway riders first to pick up their musettes. Gianni Savio watching from the Androni Giocattoli car. And I suppose the advantage for the riders in the breakaway is that they get fed and watered and get clothing a bit more than... It's a bit easier for them to get the gear than the riders in the bunch behind. So that's Fabio Tabore of the Yellow Fluo Nera Satoli squad. And riders will be collecting gloves, new capes throughout the day. Don't doubt that one or two might even change overshoes if they possibly can. Meanwhile, much less frenetic up in the breakaway, and the job, of course, getting in the food, making sure they take on all the carbohydrates they possibly can. Fabian Cancellara, very notable that he mentioned that in his interview before the start of this broadcast. Cancellara, aware as pretty much anyone else is that this is the longest single one-day race of the year that they will do. Longest day of racing on the bike in 2014 for the riders, and it comes in the first big one-day race of the year. So that's the big challenge. Not particularly arduous in terms of the terrain, but it's the sheer distance that really takes it out of the riders. Still just over 6 minutes of advantage for those 5 riders up front. And Brett James McCall suggests that it's no problem at all to print on that GABA material. It's just the question is how many teams are unofficially using it this year. And that's what a carbohydrate bar looks like. You probably wouldn't be too keen if it was presented to you for your dinner, but I tell you what, they'd be thrilled to be getting it right now. It's just the job, and it's probably the handiest way of presenting a large amount of carbohydrates in a short amount of time. 70.8 kilometers to go. Plenty of people asking on Twitter, Sean, what was how would you rank your victories in Milan Sanremo in your overall Palmares? Is the 92 win, where does that stand, and where does that stand in relation to your 86 victory?
I think the 92 victory would be one of the best ones, because it was very late in my career and I went into the race not as one of the big favourites. I was in the Torino Adriatico, felt good, and just followed the race, and had the tactic was that Milan Sanremo would follow, get to the Poggio, and see how you're feeling. And then when I got to the Poggio, I said I just sit back in 10 or 12 position, leave the race happen up front on the front end of the leading group, and not try and follow the attacks, because if you do try and follow the attacks 2 or 3 times in the Poggio, it takes so much out of you. And in a race just a fraction under 300 kilometers, you have to try and spare every ounce of energy all day, not alone as you get onto the Poggio in the final, but in the earlier part of the race as well. And that's what that was my tactic going into the race. And I got to the top of the Poggio, of course. Argentini attacked, I think, at least 3 times, rode away, and had, I think it was mentioned 9 seconds, but I actually remember as I went over the top of the Poggio, he had, I think, 13 seconds was the advantage, and I decided with that advantage I would try and go for second place. And I was with a group of about 5 riders, 6 riders, and I decided to go, and was thinking of second place at the time, and went for it there. And just made up the ground on the descent on the Poggio. But you have to calculate yourself. Experience is a great thing as well, because you know what you have to do, and that's where it comes in a little bit. The experience can get you through, especially in a race like Sanremo being so long. And as we have today, the wet conditions is going to be more demanding physically as well.
Well, an epic memory, 1992. A great win, of course, in 1986 for Sean. 5:45 now for the 5 riders up front. So it's coming down slowly but surely. Might rise a little bit as the bunch makes its way through the feed zone. Great opportunity perhaps to take another commercial break. We'll be back to you after this short break. Inside 70 kilometers now for the riders. Ronaldo Nocentini of AG2 Orla Mondial is not enjoying these conditions. The Italian, though, is racing towards Sanremo in his home classic, the first big monument of the year, the longest event of the season. 5 riders out front, and their advantage now down within 5 3/4 minutes, having been up at a maximum advantage of over 10 minutes at one stage. And is it just 4 riders up front, or perhaps is someone about to close back? And throughout the peloton, riders are suffering in the cold. Cone de Court desperate to try and get some feeling back into those hands. His hands are going to be numb, his feet are going to be numb, and riders who don't really have great form are just going to be feeling a little bit miserable at the moment. You can be pretty sure about that. Ian from the Cycling Betting says, I'm on Kristoff at 80-1, 8th last year, just missed the winning move. Likes these kind of conditions, attrition, so that's not a bad bet. Alexander Kristoff of Team Katusha. And perhaps another man to look for from Katusha is Luca Paolini. A couple of third-place finishes in this race, and well up in the league group last year. Carinello in the breakaway group, as he has been all day. 25-year-old Italian, and he's spent as much time back in his team car, I think, in the last 10k as he has out front with the other riders. So clearly looking for any bit of comfort and solace, and perhaps any bit of shelter that he can possibly get as well. That musette billowing in the wind as riders at the back of the peloton struggle to get all the contents into their back pockets. And lots of riders wearing rain jackets in this weather, as you might expect, but it's not absolutely torrential at the moment, and that'll be of some relief to the riders. Sometimes, though, when the rain stops, that's when the hands can get really cold as the wind whips through their gloves. Sounds counterintuitive, but for some reason that's how it feels. Brett James McCall says, if riders are trying to warm their hands, why are they wearing mitts still? Well, I suppose sometimes the gloves can become, they're great for a while, and then they can become a little bit of a liability once they fill up with water, and the water then, you know, is cooled by the wind. And where they were a great benefit for a while they were waterproof, they can end up being more of a liability. Heading towards Sanremo this afternoon on the Ligurian coast, and there's just endless beauty in this part of Italy. Sanremo, once the Roman settlement of Matutia, or Villa Matutiana. Sanremo it expanded in the early Middle Ages when the town moved to higher ground. They built a castle in the walled village of La Pigna to protect the town from the Saracen raiders. It also interestingly, Sanremo hosts the extremely popular Sanremo Music Festival, which has been held each spring since 1951, and on which the Eurovision Song Contest, which was first held in 1956, was modelled. So it's Sanremo you have to blame for that. And when it comes to weather, you get all kinds of everything in this race, and we're getting it all today for the peloton. 61.6 kilometers to go now for those riders. 6 minutes and 40 the latest gap, so they're maintaining it, they're controlling it well, and the tailwind will be to the advantage of the breakout front, Sean.
Yes, well, 6 minutes advantage with 61.5 kilometers to go. When you make the calculation in a normal race, well, you know, you have a chance of holding on there, but we must remember this one. They've been out there for a long time now, and you know, over 220 kilometers, so they went away very early in the day, and they're going to start tiring big time. Where back in the bunch here, I think there's a lot of riders who will just start upping the pace, and a lot of new riders have come to the front of the peloton. And the terrain, we're just getting to the difficult part. 61 kilometres. When you get to around the 55 kilometres to go, that's the time you have to start moving up, because the Capos are starting to come, and there you have to be, you know, in the front end of the race, in the top 25-30 riders at least. And that's where I think we will see the real test for what's left of the breakaway. You know, it will start, I think, melting down very quickly, because on the flat you can hold the advantage, but when it starts to kick up, and you know, the 3 Capo climbs, there will be the real test now for the breakaway, to see have they any chance of getting maybe Cipressa or the Poggio. But I think with the conditions and the distance of being out there, we've seen it before, it's going to come down very quickly when they really start getting nervous up in front end of the peloton.
Yeah, we think back to, I think it was 1982, if memory serves. Tell me on Twitter at DQ Sport if I'm wrong. But Marc Gomez surviving from the early break, the Walber rider, the Frenchman, away with his French teammate Alain Bondu, the famous pursuiter. And Gomez surviving from that early break to shock everyone. And here are images from the finish line, and they'll be squeegeeing away that water as best they can, but the riders can expect more rain before they get to the conclusion of this event in just over 60 kilometres time.
They need more than a squeegee. Look at the finish line. They need the fire brigade there shortly. It's really bucketing down, and you know, it's not looking great. As we can see, the cloud very low there, very, very dark, and it looks like we're in for just a real wet, miserable Milan Sanremo, and this is going to be a real testing one for the riders, and a dangerous one also. We're talking about the Marc Gomez victory in 82. They went away in a break and they got a huge advantage, and there was the 2 Frenchmen, Gomez and Alain Bondu, stayed away. Bondu fell actually on the descent of the Poggio. It was a little bit damp and he slided off, crashed down, and Marc Gomez went on to win that one, and that was out of a break, which gained a huge amount, if not close to a half an hour. You know, it would have been at least that.
Slightly different than the 10 minutes maximum that these riders have enjoyed. Just over 60 kilometres now for the riders who have taken on their sustenance at the feed zone and are working their way towards Sanremo in the first monument of the season. The bunch stalking the 5 riders out front. Just over 6 minutes for those leading riders, as Giant Shimano, Cannondale and Trek Factory Racing are taking responsibility for the chasing. NetApp Endura playing a watching brief just behind them. They've got a few representatives staying out of the wind and also out of trouble at the front. They've got teammate Jan Barta in the breakaway today, so they feel that they have the right to be towards the front and out of the trouble as the peloton works their way towards the end game. The Tre Capi coming up very shortly. The first of those, Capo Meli, comes, well, they crest it with 52.2 kilometres to go. And we got, there was a tweet into at DQ Sport from someone a little earlier saying, is it my imagination or are there some mudguards in the peloton today? Well, we saw these little backflips last year. It was one of the riders from Trek, if memory serves. Was that Roland from Lotto Belisol? Pim Lichtart, perhaps. Lichtart found a berth with Lotto Belisol this year. Great reward for some great attacking performances over the last couple of seasons. That bunch is really moving, Sean, isn't it? There's a big long line from front to back, and there's a hell of a lot of distance on the road between riders at the back of the peloton. Is that Tekla Hamanot, perhaps, of MTN Quebec on the right hand side, his cape billowing in the wind?
Yes, 57k to go, and we can see the bunch is really starting to up pace here as as the road kicks up a bit, we're getting to that section now where on the front of the bunch is just going to start going real fast. Position will be the thing for anybody with an idea of doing something in this Milan Sanremo. You have to start moving to the fore of the peloton, and that will, you know, make it just that little bit faster all the time. And we will see this advantage now if they can hold on for a long time with the under the 57 kilometers to go. We can see the splash pan. I don't think it's of great advantage because it's not really, you know, on your backside you're going to be cold. It's really on the front, you know, as you go through the wind, the cold wind, and the your gear is all wet. That's where you need the protection, and we can see a lot of riders still riding with the rain caves and the gloves, and that's what you've got to do earlier on. We see some riders there, as we can see here on the front of the group, almost everybody. There's a guy here on the right hand side of the screen, the Tinkoff Saxo rider, which just the midst, but that is a risk. If you continue on, you start getting cold in the end, and you're getting to this point of the race, there's not any opportunity or time to do it now. If you're in the bunch, you go back to the rear of it to get the car up and get gloves. It's just too late, so you have to do it early, and it's easy when you start warming up in the end. If you start getting too warm, just rip them off, throw them to the side of the road. The same with your raincoat, you can do the same. It's very important that you keep warm, and then when you get to the final, you can start peeling off this stuff. But if you go to this point and you start getting cold, well, then it's so difficult to get the gloves on first of all, and then to heat up.
It's a big field, 200 riders today, 25 teams of 8 who took the start line in Milan this morning. Seems like a long time ago now. 3 riders failing to take the start. Bjorn Terau of Team Europe car, Stefan Denifel of IM Cycling, and also most notably JJ Rojas of the Movistar team. Unfortunately crashed in the neutralized section, so didn't quite get to the start proper. So a big disappointment for the Spaniard, who would have been well, an outsider for victory, definitely with a shout. And now all the attention from the Movistar team will be directed towards Francisco Ventoso, Fran Ventoso. A couple of 11th place finishes in this race, so he knows how to get into the group at the finish, and if he has the legs, well, he certainly has the experience at this point in his career. Just over 5.5 minutes now for the 5 riders up front. This is the final RCS event. And reliably informed ahead of Giro d'Italia, which of course begins in Northern Ireland, in Belfast, in May. And a great weekend of celebrations for that event coming up. Killian Kelly says Mark Gomez in 1982 was the last moustache man to win Milan Sanremo. Degenkolb to change all that today. Who would bet against him? Is that a verified fact? Divine moustache. Do beards count? Matteo Bono believes that he can hang on out front. Well, he's going to try anyway. 30 years of age. Won a stage of Tirreno Adriatico back in 2007. Ever present on the Lampre team since he turned pro in 2006. A good first couple of years. Won an Eneco stage of Eneco Tour a couple of years ago. Stage of Tour Roman do back in 2007. These days very much a domestique, one of the hard grafters, who's been given an opportunity to race out front, and indeed, for what it's worth, has given his Lampre team the afternoon off in terms of chasing. So they'll be focusing all their attention on the likes of Pippo Pozzato. Perhaps Diego Ulisi could come up with a decent result, and I think a lot of eyes on Sasha Modolo, 4th in 2010. I think Modolo, again, another good outsider, capable of getting over the small climbs and also capable of a very fast finish indeed. Has he got the endurance to get through 300 kilometers? Has he got the ability to fend off the cold that will be seeping into his bones from this rain? Rich Buxton says, why are the riders going for these new style of helmets? Are they more aero? Yes, is the answer. And I think on a day like this, also have a little bit of extra insulation as well. Aero was the first reason. And very much not Jack Barr, more like Jan Barta on the front for Team Neda. So Chilinghi, Barta, Bono and Demar, the 4 riders up front now. Paranello has finally cracked and gone back. So that the arrowhead at the front of the peloton, coming towards the final 30-odd miles or so of this Milan Sanremo. 53.3 kilometers to go for the riders as they close down the advantage to it's now 4 riders up front: Mark Demar, Jan Barta, Martin Ciccini and Matteo Bono. Antonio Paranello of Androni Giocattoli has been shelled. Nicola Bohm went a little bit earlier. Nathan Haas fell victim to a puncture. And that was the composition of the 7 riders out front initially. Pim Lichtart still at the back of the group with that distinctive little plastic mudguard. Just keeps a little bit of extra rain off him, and quite an effective little tool actually. Surprised more riders haven't used it. Appeared last year, attracted a lot of attention. Mark Sharon reminds me that the mudguards are called ass savers. Alex Sweden says I think it was Adam Hansen from Lotto last year that introduced the world to the ass saver.
We did see last year, I think it was Lars Back from Lotto Bellassol, he also had a one when he was in the breakaway, that long breakaway which he was out in for most of the day.
Get a side of former world champion and former Milan Sanremo winner Mark Cavendish, and his he looks absolutely frozen. I don't think Mark's enjoying it at the moment. He's still got plenty of Omega Pharma Quick Step riders around him, trying to keep him sheltered as best they can, but well, Cavendish not enjoying these conditions at all. Having said that, it's not like he hasn't seen conditions a bit like it over the years growing up in the Isle of Man, and he's made of tough stuff. Whenever you tell him it's going to be difficult, well, he redoubles his efforts. Riders at the back of the group, Paolini, one of those. Well, he's a man with some very extensive facial adornment, and Paolini just driving his way up the right-hand side. Interesting that a rider of his experience leaving it as late as he is to work his way to the front of the bunch.
Yes, well, we're getting to that stage now as we see there Paolini, he's hanging very much to the rear. It's not the place to be, but again, you know, you can do that. You have to make a bit of an effort, because if it does start to speed up in front, but I think with the conditions the way they are, these wet conditions, it's not going to maybe be as aggressive on the earlier part, on the Capas, as it would be in dry conditions. But again, we'll have to wait and see if, you know, anybody hanging around on the rear end of the peloton. I'd be surprised if we see them in the final of this one.
So a race of 2 halves down from Milan towards the coast through the Turchino, and then the next climb. Capo Mele, Capo Cervo, Capo Berta, the 3 short, sharp climbs. Staying at the front, absolutely critical, not just because they're pretty difficult to get up on one side, but also a little bit technical on the descent, and it's very important to stay at the front and avoid any potential crashes with riders chasing back on, and riders desperately trying to work some warmth into those bones. Riders changing riders have changed tire pressure for these conditions. Were you one to fiddle with your tire pressure?
Well, normally you would have a little bit less, but there's only, you know, a fraction, and you know, during the race is easy to do, because as we have seen here, there's a lot of time to just, you know, stop, pull over and just leave a fraction out, and I think you would be a bit concerned if they were forecasting dry conditions for the final of this race. Well, then you might have to just do that, but it only takes, you know, seconds to do it, and the riders, you know, they're so experienced, they can do it so quickly.
Brett Lancaster of Orica GreenEdge goes to the back to his car, and let's get another side of Mark Cavendish, and he looks like he's shivering, doesn't he?
Yes, he certainly does there. We can see that his slip seems to be really wobbly. Yes, and it's not good if you're cold, and at this time. Although on the Capos you can get a bit of heat into the body again. You can start to work a bit more here on the flat. When you're following in the peloton, it can be quite cold because you're just in the drafting. You're getting carried along very easy. And as we can see here, Mark Cavendish is very much to the fore with the Omega Pharma Quick Step rider, so that is a good sign. And the couple of Capos here, they're not that testing where you get into difficulty, but you can warm up a bit, and that's what they will be hoping here. I think a lot of the riders, as we can see, they're starting to strip off some of the heavier rain gear now, because we'll come to that point.
It's a gamble though, because it's going to be tough to get that jacket back on if it's necessary a little bit later on, but obviously things are heating up in every way as the peloton perseveres out front. Still around about 5 minutes advantage, 49.5 kilometers to go inside the final 50. And Matteo Bono out front for Lampre Merida, driving hard. Garmin Sharp have Tom Jelte-Schleiter, remember. Super performances in Paris-Nice, couple of stage wins there. And another outsider. There's so many people that come into this race and believe that they have a chance, perhaps more than any other classic, as we see Luca Paolini
putting tea on his fingers.
Yeah, we saw one of the riders in the break a little bit earlier on. I think it might have been when we were on a break, and he clearly had a beat on that was marked tea. So hot tea, if it's possible to get, then just to get a little bit of warmth on the inside. And in Luca Paolini's case, it might be useful just to warm those fingers up for a little while. A forlorn hope, I suspect. And of course, in your day, Sean, I mean, just pulling the brakes in those conditions was really quite difficult, because if your hands were a little numb.
Well, that is a problem. Your feel in the fingers is not anything like it would normally be when you're a little bit cold. So for the descent, it's always dangerous, because you just, the feeling of your braking is not great, and that's where you can make mistake as well. You go a bit too heavy without really feeling it, and I think we see Paolini there, putting the tea, or look like tea, and hot tea to get, some little feeling back into his fingers. It's the last resort, really. If you're hanging down the end of the peloton, where you can call your car and you can get a hot bottle of tea and do that, but it's difficult to to warm up at this point. But we can see some of the guys, it's amazing, they're riding in mitts there, and other guys are riding in the big winter gloves. Some guys support it so much better than others, and if you're one who can support the colder conditions, well then that is a big advantage here, because they've been out here for a long time. As we said, on the Torcino they got the cold conditions, and the body have been cold all the time, and now we still with just 48 kilometers to go. If you support a bit better, well then it's a great advantage to have.
Yeah, simple as that. It's just it's a physical attribute, no more, no less. Dan Worry says Luca isn't quite wet enough. That's why he's doing that. Mark DeMar takes on as much sustenance and is offered plenty more from the United Healthcare car. And from Curacao, formerly a Dutch national, but now a former Curacao national champion, and proudly wears those colours. Okay, inside 50 kilometers to go, just over 5 minutes advantage for the four riders up front. We're going to get another break out of the way as Katusha Chase in the peloton behind. Just over 45 kilometers to go, 46 kilometers to go indeed in Milan Sanremo. Adam Hansen is on the front of the group for Lotto Belisol. Just tucked in over his right shoulder is Andre Greipel, a man we've yet to mention. Cannondale continuing to pile on the pressure as they chase down the break of four riders up front. More particularly, they're also putting pressure on the big sprinters who don't like the climbing. And Andre Greipel, well, likes it less than most. He'd get it up quicker than pretty much any amateur in the world. But of the pros, it's not the thing that he's best at. So for the likes of Andre Greipel, it's a case of staying on the front, or as close to the front as he possibly can, and losing as little pressure as possible. Confirmation, 4 minutes and 55 seconds to the four riders up front. But Greipel's not a man that we've really mentioned. Seems to be in good form at the moment. Sean, would you put fiver each way on him?
Well, I think the conditions as well, he can support that quite well. He is, one of the hard men, and we can see that the teammates are starting to appear to the front, and that is always a good sign when you see some of the domestiques of a sprinter. We can see Marcel Sieberg also, the big German rider, coming there up to the front end of the peloton. So it could be that they've got the orders that Greipel is feeling okay and they want to be in the right position. But we also see the rear end of the peloton there just a moment ago, and the rear trapdoor was open big time. There was a lot of riders starting to go out already, and the race is not really full gas at the moment, but it's just the conditions, the cold, the riders is just stuck in their bodies and not able to cling on to the end of the peloton.
How we had a tweet in as well, how critical is the Poggio in wet weather conditions? How does it change the tactics, and how much does it play into the end game?
Well, I think first of all, depending on how you're feeling, if you feel real strong, well, it's probably a good thing to try and go in the attack if you can do it at all, because it's going to be hectic on the descent, and there's always the danger of somebody falling. So if you can create 8-10 second gap over the top with one rider or maybe 2 or 3 riders, it's a little bit safer, because the group behind are going to be maybe 15-20 riders, and anybody can crash. The guy in 3rd, 4th position crashes, well, then he just upsets that chase, and if you're out in front with 5 or 7 seconds advantage, it's a good thing. And I think in the wet conditions, it's worth taking that risk.
Do you think someone like Degenkolb would I mean, that was something that you did in '86 in particular. You might have been odds on to win the bunch sprint, but you decided to chase across alone to that group of riders up front. Do you think Degenkolb is this kind of rider who might do that?
Well, I think Degenkolb is going to go to the Poggio and try and just follow in the top 15 riders, but he'll not try and go in the attack. I don't think he'll be capable of doing that. But the riders like a Cancellara, a Chavanel, those type of riders, they are going to certainly try go in the attack, and there's many others when you go through the list of riders here, and they're going to just try and get that little bit of an advantage, maybe not fancying the wet descent. And there'll be a lot of riders a little bit scary of the wet conditions. Even if you're a good descender, how fast you can take these corners, but somebody in front of you breaks a little bit too heavy in the corner, panics a bit, and then he can just lock on and slide down, and he can take down so many. So that is going to be a concern, and maybe change the tactics of some of the riders for the Poggio.
Edwin Squire says, I was a bit unfair on Greipel. By no means a mountain goat, but can do a short climb better than some of the big name sprinters. Fair comment there, actually. In fact, that short climb to the finish in that it was 3rd stage of Tirreno Adriatico. Greipel well to the fore, and I think better than pretty much all the sprinters on that occasion, with the exception of Peter Sagan. Short, sharp shocks, no doubt about it. The power he generates, Greipel can get up the short ones. Martin Cilingi persevering and hoping to hang on for as long as possible. Inside 5 minutes now for those riders. Cilingi, the 36-year-old from the Netherlands, won the Tour of Belgium back in 2006, 3rd in Paris-Roubaix in 2011, and no doubt he'll be hoping that he can come up with a good performance again on the Cobbled Classic to come. This very different challenge indeed. 4.5 minutes, so it's really coming down very swiftly indeed. Capo Berta, next challenge for the riders. We've had the Mele, we've had the Cervo. Berta next up, and the bunch pretty much compacto at the moment. Cycling Man says, look at all the pink houses. Let's hope some of the homeowners in Ireland are watching. This is what you need to do for the Giro. Well, that would be interesting if everywhere in Northern Ireland, and indeed all the way down to Dublin for stage 3 is painted pink for the riders. Cannondale chasing hard on the front. Katusha take it up. They have belief. Is it Paolini? Is it Kristoff? They have options. Cannondale, no doubt about where they're placing all their eggs there in the Peter Sagan basket. Down off the Cervo, onto the coast once more, hugging the sea, which is looking distinctly choppy indeed today. Sanremo host to an annual poker tournament as part of the European Poker Tour, and apparently is widely accepted as the origin of a variant form of 5-card stud called Telesina or Terracina. I'm not a card player. You a card player, Sean?
When I was racing.
A bit of a poker face when you arrived up to Argentina that time.
Yes, I played a bit of poker when I got into the final of a classic. Since then, no.
How do you prevent the other riders from just going, well, I'm not taking a sprinter to the line? I mean, you know, how do you bluff it out with them?
Well, that is a problem as a sprinter, and you see it so many times, and I think of recent there we see it in the Paris-Nice, in the stage finish in Belleville in the Bonjolet. There was a very severe climb inside the final 20 kilometres, and Degenkolb was chasing with a big group of riders, and he was the one who was left doing the chase because he was a sprinter. And that is the problem when you're in a group. A lot of riders are going to look at you, but here you have a big peloton, and it's not going to be get to that type of tactic. You know, there'll be so many riders, so many teams want to control the situation, and as a sprinter here you just have to follow, and you're hoping you're one of the sprinters that will be able to succeed and do that.
We're on the Capo, Berto. Just over 40 kilometres of racing left. Mark Cavendish sitting tight and very close to the front of the group. Clearly has good legs today. We saw his teeth chattering, his lips wobbling, and he's absolutely bitterly cold out there. But the legs are churning well. So too the combined forces of Katusha and Cannondale. We're getting towards the business end of Milan-San Remo. It's been all business for the riders today, but now I think perhaps they'll be feeling the pit in their stomach. I'm wondering if it's hunger or whether it's nerves coming towards the finale of this first big classic of the year. A few little cracks developing in the group as the riders they're making sure that they stay safe. But the pace is certainly pretty hectic there. Look, as riders are making their way back on, and if you're struggling to get back on after that climb, well, things are only going to get more difficult indeed, because next up we've got the Berta very shortly, then the Cipressa, then the Poggio, the summit of which is reached with just over 6 kilometres left in the race. So we understand there's 4 minutes to the riders up front, surely on the way back. 4 minutes with 40 kilometres to go. Ordinarily you'd say, well, they've got a racer's chance, but they've got some very, very tough climbs left, and the power is down in a big way in the peloton behind. It's very tough indeed for those riders. And this the time when it's getting to the point where there can be no mistakes. Any crash, any puncture, any difficulty whatsoever, as difficulty indeed for Jan Barta. Has he moved ahead, or has he been left behind by the other his companions in the breakaway? He's just struggling a few bike lengths off the back of his 3 breakaway companions: Martin Cilingi of Belkin, Mark Demar of United Healthcare, and Matteo Bono of the Lampre Merida squad. They're the 3 riders, with Barta absolutely killing himself to get back on. 29-year-old Czech rider, won the GC at the Coppi Bartali week in 2012. 6th in the time trial at the Tour of Algarve this year. He can just hang on to the top of this hill. I think he'd be back with his breakaway companions very shortly, but they're not waiting for him. They're not looking around. They're not that concerned about getting the extra legs from him. They know that they, at this stage, need to press on. If anyone's struggling on this climb, they probably won't have much value to add to the breakaway anyway. And Barta, God, has he cracked? I think it could be difficult for him to get back at this stage. He's starting to lose the shape. Out of the saddle one more time, desperately trying to stay on top of the gear that he knows he needs to turn if he's to get back to that group. Meanwhile, the group behind, look at the difference. Obviously they're not on the climb yet, but they really are charging on. And Mark Cavendish, very encouraging signs for fans of the British National Road Race champion, because he's well to the fore, and that's it for Barta.
Certainly is. He's running out of power here, and we can see he's just difficulty, you know, keeping any sort of a rhythm. And we can see, you know, the 3 other breakaway companions, they are just working at it. 3:40 at the moment, with 39.5 kilometres to go. And the front of the bunch here, we can see Katusha, the ones who are pushing on a lot. Mark Cavendish very much to the fore here, so it's looking quite good at the moment. But We did see there a moment ago on the further back in the peloton riders, one line, and they're the ones who are struggling just to stay in there. You have to be able to stay there in that group of 30. If you can stay in there in the centre of that, you can conserve a lot of energy, get carried along as far as possible.
Conor Murphy wants to know what happens to the mechanical chip, the timing chip, when you change bike. Well, you haven't got it, so they at that point are relying on the photo finish camera. The timing chip always used in conjunction with the photo finish camera. Eagle Farm Quick Step delivering Mark Cavendish in perfect shape to the Capo Berta. After this, the Cipressa is arrived at 27.65 kilometers to go, according to the road book. Pretty much at the top of the Berta now, so 27.65 kilometers to go is the start of the Cipressa. It's about 5.65 kilometers long, 4.1% average, 9% max, and reaches a height not really significant, 234 meters. The 4.1% average is just a few little stingy bits on it, but it's not particularly difficult. It's just it comes after so much racing in their legs at that moment. Over 240 kilometers of racing. Fabian Cancellara, well wrapped up against the coat. A picture of concentration, and obviously struggling to see through those clear sunglasses. So obviously he hasn't put the fairy liquid on the inside of the lens and rubbed the potato on it, or Rain-X, or whatever the magic potion it is, to prevent them from steaming up, because he's not getting the visibility he requires from them. So they're sitting up on his forehead, and of little value there. 6 hours of racing for these riders now, just under 40 kilometers to go. 3 riders up front. I don't think Jan Bart is going to be able to make it back to those 3. He certainly will try, though. The NetApp Endura rider consigned to his fate, as have been the other 4 riders. Cancellara making sure that he gets to the front of the group, and now we see him without his jacket on all of a sudden.
Yes, very quickly there, he gets rid of the rain jacket, and this is the time to do it. Stay wrapped up as long as possible, get the heat back into the body if you're feeling cold, and that's the way you can, ride in the final real good, if you heat the body up a bit and just get rid of the rain jacket. And we can see Cancellara there. He was on camera there, and 2 minutes or less than he was at to get rid of the raincoat. So we can see a lot of riders having difficulty here, just the rain conditions. 250 kilometers already covered here, so as I said earlier, the riders can ride 200, 220, but when you get above that, then it's the time when a lot of riders start getting into difficulty.
What do you think about Vincenzo Nibali's chances?
I think looking at his Paris-Nice condition, I don't think he will be there in the final shake-up. I would be majorly surprised because we see some uphill finishes in the Paris-Nice, and he was getting into difficulty last year. Torino Adriatico, he was very competitive, of course, won that last year, and I think he's just that little bit further back in his preparation. Of course, not doing the Tour of Italy this year, he has a bit more time to get ready for the Tour of France, which is 2 months later.
Well, Mark Cavendish getting as much air into his lungs as he possibly can to feed those muscles. Vincenzo Nibali looks a lot more relaxed, as you might expect, but of course Mark Cavendish, well, when it comes to a sprint finish, much greater facility. Now inside 3 minutes for these 3 riders up front. So they're doing an absolutely wonderful job, but they'll do well to have any sort of advantage going over the Cipressa. For what it's worth, though, they really are hanging out there for a long, long time.
Well, I suppose if you've been out there all day, yeah, you just keep on working and try and stay out as long as possible. Get as much out of it, and getting a lot of air time here. And if you get to the Cipressa and try and get over that, well, then you get onto the Poggio, maybe with the leading group, and that's important. Possibly, do something for some of your teammates if some of them come up in the leading part of the peloton.
Just saw Enrico Gasparotto, the Astana Pro Team rider, just looking like he was falling off a cliff there, just getting shelled from the group. He was 14th, very much in the group, sprinting for 7th position in last year's race. He clearly knows how to get around this race, but Gasparotto feeling the effects of this long, long ride in wet weather conditions today. So now they got the might get the fire engine out, but it's doing a job of sweeping things up, hoovering up all the all the rain on the finish line at Lungomare and Talo Calvino. Still, the rain pours down relentlessly. And of course, for the riders that have taken off those rain jackets, they'll be piling back into wet weather conditions close to the finish. I think they'll get by on adrenaline at that point. The rain jackets can be a bit of a liability, especially on the climbs where they've got lots of heat, and then when they come to the fast stuff at the end, it can be a bit of a windsock. Even the best of them tend to billow in the wind a little bit and are a bit of an aerodynamic liability. 3 riders up front, 2 minutes and 51 seconds. And there's Gasparotto. Gasparotto off the back, not quite sure by how much and whether he's going to be able to make it in there. It looked like he was just about going to perhaps tag onto the back of the group, but it doesn't augur well for his for the legs he's got bringing to the finale of this race. Well, Robertson says Cav looks good, shorts and mitts too. He's hard. Certainly a tough racer. And well to the fore at the moment. Inside 3 minutes now to the 3 riders up front. Inside 35 kilometers to go in Milan Sanremo. We'll get another break out of the way. We're back after these. We're in the end game of Milan Sanremo 2014 as they chase down the 3 riders up front, now with an advantage of just over 2.5 minutes. The rain jackets are coming off as the riders are getting down to the serious business. I can tell you Mark Cavendish riding very well indeed, just tucked in the second tier of riders here at the very front of the group and heading towards the Cipressa, the penultimate challenge for the sprinters to try and get over, with a total of 5.5 kilometers in length, 4 and a bit percent. As at the back of the peloton, riders are desperately trying to cling to the wheel in front. Little gaps emerging as riders challenged with closing the gap to the rider in front. Other riders just popping out of the line, gone for the day. So things getting very serious indeed. Very impressive how well Mark Cavendish is riding, but he's lost a couple of teammates. A couple of serious teammates.
Yes, he's lost some teammates, but he's very much to the fore, and that's where you have to be more so today because of this wet conditions, as we can see. You know, a few corners here as you go downhill. If somebody make a mistake, well then if you're a bit further back, you can get caught out. And if you're not taken down, you have to make the chase to get back in again, and that's what you certainly do not need before we get on to the Cipressa. And you know, very much to the front of the group. We can see there the peloton itself, it's really broken, and that's a lot of that's happened this end. Some of the riders are not as comfortable on the descent and just leave 2 or 3 bike lengths, then it's 4 or 5 bike lengths, and it grows to 150 meters, and you find yourself chasing, trying to back in there to get back to the main peloton, and you know, you just get spat out like that. As we can see here, the front of the bunch, the Katusha rider just leaving it run a little wide there, panicking a little bit.
Made sure he was inside that manhole, but danger, of course, is he might have taken his teammate out there. Amiga Pharma Quick Step, I can tell you, have lost Mikhail Kwiatkowski. He's been in stunning form so far this year. Also Mark Renshaw. Lots of activity in the Androni Giocattoli team car. Gianni Savio, the director sportif, working hard for his squad today. They've had a man in the break, though he's been dropped a little while ago. But the loss of Renshaw and Kwiatkowski might be viewed as being a worry for Mark Cavendish, but he does, of course, have the assistance of Alessandro Fataki, former winner of this race back in 2005, second place the following year. And Zdenek Stybar, not absolutely sure that he's in there, but I'd be surprised if he isn't. He's in great form, and he's a great second card to play for Amiga Pharma Quick Step.
Yes, he has to be in there. Of course, he's a rider. His bike handling is brilliant. Coming from cyclocross, I don't think the weather conditions, will cause any problems to him here. But again, it's going to be the distance. The final climbs, will he be good enough? We see him in the Paris-Nice. He was very much in contention, but on the final stage around Nice, he got into a little bit of difficulty. I think it was on Col d'A's time. So again, the distance and the speed of this race in the end, it could be difficult. But he is in real good shape, and I think it will be all for Mark Cavendish as we get on to the Cipressa and the Poggio. Cavendish will be the man who they will be all looking after and trying to get into the Poggio in the best conditions possible.
Well, not much more than 50 riders involved up front. Well, 3 riders up front, then the 50 chasing behind. Mark Cavendish is in there. Greipel's certainly in there. Degenkolb in there for Giant Shimano. And we have to believe that certainly Alexander Kristoff is there, because Team Katusha are absolutely charging on the front and are closing down to 2.5 minutes. Well, I can tell you that it's only 2 minutes. This is the caption you have there is 2.5 minutes, but what we're getting from Radio Tour is actually 2 minutes to the riders up front. So no doubt that they're going to be caught at this rate. They're not going to be caught much after the Cipressa. In fact, they'd be lucky to get up it in front of the race. Getting unofficial reports as well that Pataki could well be out the back. So that's not such good news for Mark Cavendish. He might have to hunt his way through the pack to find his way to the front at the conclusion. But very, very impressive riding by Mark Cavendish. Well, I tell you what, back in 2009, he kind of hoodwinked everyone with the way he rode on the climbs in Tirreno Adriatico. Little bit of sandbagging from him on that occasion. He certainly went looking for a sprint success in Tirreno in the last week. Did get that on the final road stage, but hasn't been any huge indication that he's got massive form. All the talk has been about getting himself to the Tour de France first stage in Yorkshire in July in a perfect position. Well, I tell you what, he's going well today and right in contention as we look at the contenders. Going to get a final break out of the way, but please do join us again for the closing stages after these. The 3 leaders have arrived on the Cipressa in the closing stages of Milan Sanremo 2014. The gap for these 3 riders up front just on 2 minutes, and it looks as if Cialinghi has good legs today as he charges clear of Mark Demar, and Matteo Bono seems to be struggling of the 3 riders. Matteo Bono going south, going north, Mark Demar and Martin Cialinghi. But I can tell you, back in the main group of riders behind, about 50, maybe 60 riders are in contention and gunning down this breakaway group. Just 2 riders very shortly will remain from the initial 7 that charged off the front after 15 kilometres in this 294-kilometre slog from Milan to Sanremo today. It's still raining hard at the finish line in Sanremo as they attempt to clear the finish line and make it as safe as possible for what could well be a big group finish, or also could conceivably, well, it could be anything really. It could be a solo win, could be a small group, could be a bunch finish. Anything can happen in Milan Sanremo, and very often does, as we see the massed ranks of Lotto Belisol now on the front. So clearly Andre Greipel's in good form today. Jan Barta is mopped up by the peloton. Geschke comes to the front. He's got a job to do for John Degenkolb. Degenkolb is in the group, and Giant Shimano want to take things up. So Lotto Belisol and Giant Shimano taking responsibility on the front of the group. For so much of the afternoon, it's been the Cannondale team that have taken responsibility for making things as difficult as they possibly could for the sprinters in the group. Haven't managed to shell the big guns at the moment. Greipel's in there, Degenkolb is in there. So too is Mark Cavendish for Amiga Pharma Quickstep. Haven't getting a few tweets into @DQ Sport, people asking what about Team Sky. Well, they're not visible on the front of the peloton at the moment. They'll be hoping that Edvald Boasson-Hagen is in decent nick. We believe that Arnaud Demar is in the group for Française de Jeu. And Degenkolb there in the middle of the group, just taking his jacket off, and Cannondale go to the front, and this is not a surprise, Sean. This is what we've been expecting, because they've got to make things tough and do a job for Peter Sagan. The race is really hotting up now.
Yes, that would have been the expectation. Cannondale would try and make it as difficult as possible. As we can see here, you know, Degenkolb very much to the front, Cavendish there as well, and Cannondale are just going to make it real difficult. As they start here, the Cipressa, we just turned onto it, you know, keep the pressure real high and try and put the sprinters under difficulty. If you do not drop on this one, well, then you put them under pressure, and they possibly will pay on the Poggio.
Peter Sagan sitting in second position for Cannondale. 24 years of age. People are starting to get impatient that he's taking his time to win his first monument. It could be today. Seems a little bit unreasonable for a rider in such tender years. But 63 race wins already in his career. As riders are being popped out the back. That's Hugo Hull from AG Tour Le Mondial, who cries enough and will struggle to get back on even for the Poggio. And even if he did, the Poggio no doubt would be his Waterloo. Now riders from Bardiani, Valvoli, CSF are also going south. Little groups of 5 and 10 riders are going to make this a very small group at the front by the time they get to the top of the Cipressa. Some of these will get back on, but well, not if you're getting shelled at this point in the climb. Still piling the pressure on the front. Peter Sagan looking very comfortable indeed in second position. It's Demarchi of Cannondale that's doing the damage, and what an impressive job he's doing indeed. And that group can't be more than 20 riders at this stage, if it's even as many as that. Ben Swift, is it, in third position for Sky Pro Cycling. Very impressive work. Don't see too many Sky jerseys in there. One making his way up the line on the right-hand side. Is it Edvald Boasson-Hagen? Because he's their go-to guy today. And Demarchi setting an absolutely relentless pace. Got a side of Mark Cavendish. He's slipped down the group a little bit, but he's still in there. He's still surviving. Now the top of the Cipressa is arrived, according to the road group, with 22 kilometers remaining. Just under a minute and a half advantage for the two riders up front, Chilinghi and Mark Demar. What a savage ride that they're doing, because there's a good chance they could well get to the Poggio. Still in the lead of this race. It seems beyond the bounds of possibility that they could survive out front to the conclusion, but they could well come up with a very solid finish. But these two riders, they've been out front since kilometer 15, and some savage racing at the beginning to try and get that break established. So these riders really showing amazing endurance, as Demarchi also shows that he's got fantastic legs today. Cavendish is still in there. And is that Nibali, Vincenzo Nibali makes the move that he absolutely had to, and we knew it was coming, and everyone was waiting for it, and it's happened. And the question is, who's going to be able to close it down? Vincenzo Nibali cannot possibly bring a large group to the line. There's no way he can even think about out sprinting them, and he just goes to the side and gallops off the front, apparently without any difficulty. No signs of effort on his face. A little bit of blowing there. I can tell you this is a big effort coming down from Vincenzo Nibali, but very, very much in control of his of the effort that he's making at the moment. Well, what a great effort too from Demarchi, because he's keeping him very much inside, and none of the other teams have decided to react to this.
Well, we could see the BMC rider, Greg Van Avermaet. He looked at Vincenzo Nibali, went in the attack there, but I don't think...
Nibali has caught Bono from the original break, the third rider on the road, and I don't think it's going to be too long before he catches the other two riders as well, because they weren't that far ahead starting the Cipressa.
Yes, and the surprising one is that Nibali attacking here, because I think the pace being set by the Cannondale rider Demarchi was quite strong, but Nibali decides to up the pace a bit. Cannondale continue on working on the front with Demarchi, but is it for somebody else within the team of Nibali that they're really setting up here? Because as I said, Nibali maybe not in the best of shape, but he's a rider that can, just improve so much in the number of days. In Paris-Nice he wasn't at his best, but he's certainly feeling good here.
Another man feeling good, Gerald. Is that Gerald Cielek from MTN Quebec? It's got to be him, hasn't it? As he shaved the beard off, he's looking very, very strong, very comfortable indeed, sitting in 6th position, the defending champion. Surprised everyone with that victory last year, and I think he's in there again and looking in good shape for a good result. But Vincenzo Nibali now within a minute of the two riders up front, but more importantly and more interestingly, what is the gap to the riders behind? He's settled into his own rhythm now, not looking behind, but Demarchi's doing a wonderful job. The camera perhaps foreshortening the gap to Nibali, but there's no question that he is well within touch of those other riders up front, and Nibali needs a decent advantage. Cresting the Cipressa, doesn't seem to be drawing out front of the group as much as he needs to.
Well, I think again the pace being set by the Cannondale Rider Marquis is quite a strong pace, so it's difficult to pull out a huge advantage. But if he keeps on working here, he could maybe gain 5 or 7 seconds and then go for the descent. But it's a long ways between the Cipressa and the Poggio. When you get to the bottom of the descent of the Cipressa, you have about 9 kilometers to get to the Poggio, so it is a long one. But he will maybe hoping that somebody else will come across to him, maybe come across on the descent, and then go on from there to do that 9 kilometers to get onto the Poggio.
Riders absolutely killing themselves at the back of this group to try and hang on. They're scrabbling for the last little bit of energy, and they've got another couple of kilometers of this savagery and suffering to endure before they'll have got over the Cipressa, and then they have to try and gather the thoughts for the final ascent of the Poggio, which begins with just under 10 kilometers left in the race. So still lots of effort to be expended by the riders. Vincenzo Nibali looks like a little afternoon training spin for him at the moment. He's managing to hang on out in front of this group as he mops up Mark Tamar and Martin Cilingi up front. Just over half a minute to Vincenzo Nibali. And Nibali in turn looks like he's got well over 20 seconds advantage to the riders behind, but he needs more than that. No sign of Philippe Gilbert. We might have expected something similar from him. A couple of BMC riders in there. Greg Van Avermaet going well today. Tough to pick out numbers, of course, because they're wearing the rain jackets. They don't put numbers on those. But what an effort here from DeMarchi, and no panic from the peloton, Sean.
No, nobody wanting to go in the attack. I think when you look at the situation out front with our two leaders, Mark Tamar and Cilingi, and then Nibali just in between here, there's no need for panic at the moment, because at this point there's a long ways to go to the finish, and so there is time on their hands. And the interesting one is you can see this group of favourites we see here. It's got to be very, very small, and the ride is just losing contact. The weather conditions is just taking its toll. We have about 25, 30 riders maximum in this group of favourites.
The long limbs of Mark Tamar, Martin Cilingi, stockier, more powerful looking figure, but the two of them combined effort, and they're still able to chat. So they're Mark Tamar looks like he might be suffering a little bit more than Cilingi at the moment, but the two of them were still working well together. Now just over 20 seconds ahead of Vincenzo Nibali, with a kilometer to go according to the road book to the top of the Cipressa. Group behind still relatively compact despite the efforts being made at the back of the group. They look in good shape at the moment. Great effort from Salvatore Puccio, the Italian. Crashed in this race last year, if memory serves. He's in at the back of the group, but still in contention for Team Sky. So Nibali charging across this gap and putting time into the group behind, and he certainly needs to, as he crests the rise very shortly. Mark Cavendish almost taken out by one of the yellow fluo riders. Perhaps not, just have to make a little adjustment. And now 40 seconds to the two riders up front for that bunch. So there's no question but that the two are going to be caught. The question is, will Vincenzo Nibali be able to stay out front before they get to the Poggio? And I think this looks difficult for Vincenzo Nibali, Sean. Does he need someone else to come across?
Well, he will be hoping that he can make contact with the two leaders on the descent and get to get together with a three-man group to get to the Poggio. Otherwise, he needs somebody to come across, because on his own it's going to be a real hard battle.
Just of the Astana team, the local favourite, the man from Sicily. And here the crowd cheer as he launches himself off the Cipressa, and now has to try and find the power necessary to stay in front of this large group of favourites. Well, with just over 20 seconds, 24 seconds between Nibali and the group behind, if even that, as they crest the Cipressa. Great news for Mark Cavendish, great news for Greipel and for Degenkolb and other great sprinters, because they've got one of the big hills out of the way. Now the Poggio awaits. Nibali out front very shortly to make the junction with the two riders up front. Mark Demar for United Healthcare, Martin Cilingi for the Team Belkin squad, and Nibali is a fantastic, a fearless descender. He really just seems so confident on the bike, and he's able to make all sorts of adjustments if things aren't absolutely perfect on turn-in. He's able to, he just really does have a great sense of balance and a wonderful belief that he's just got the grip necessary to get round the corner. Having said that, we have seen mistakes. I do seem to remember one crash in the Giro d'Italia last year, which fortunately didn't cost him dear. He was able to chase back on pretty quickly, but mistakes can happen. They have happened from Vincenzo Nibali in the past, but it hasn't seemed to affect his confidence. And Nibali, being a good descender, is not a bad advantage to have, as well as being a good climber at this point in this race. Lotto Belisol, plenty of representatives in their group, not least of which we understand is Andre Greipel, certainly very, very prominent on the approach to the Cipressa. As we look behind from the lead motorbike, these two riders very shortly to be joined by Vincenzo Nibali, and it's not always the case that the great climbers are also great descenders, but that's a wonderful extra arrow in his quiver, isn't it?
Yes, well, we've seen in the past Nibali, and he is just one of the great descenders, although he's taking it, I think, a little bit more cautious here, and this one it is a one when it's the wet conditions, it can be very slidey, and he's not really pushing big time, but he's catching up with the two leaders out on the road, and that's going to be important as we get down to the seafront once again. He needs those men to do a little bit with him, although they are getting very tired. They still will be maybe able to do a turn in the front, and that's very important. As we can see, Nibali, he just floats by Cilingi and Demar so easily, and looks so comfortable on the descent.
Yeah, these two guys behind must be, as you say, so tired, so the concentration level's not quite at the same level, and Nibali just disappears. It just shows the extra commitment, and he went up the inside into that right-hander, and Cilingi was had to make a little adjustment there, but fortunately didn't panic as they come up to the hairpin left, and already, oh man, look at that, for Cilingi almost stops ill on the exit, and Mark Demar takes it up for him, but Nibali disappears into the distance, and I think for Nibali, he must be wondering now, well, what's he thinking about, Sean? Is he wondering who's coming across to him, or does he have to do this one on his own?
Well, I think when he went in the attack, he was hoping that there would be somebody maybe come with him, but unfortunately nobody reacted, or deciding that it was a bit too far out, and now you have to just take it here and go for it, and he is making a very good ascent, but here we come down to the seafront again along the coast, and this is a 9-kilometer section to get to the Poggio, and this is where it's going to be difficult. But sometimes we've seen it when you get onto this section, the teams start looking at each other. Who's going to do the chase? Is Omega Pharma? Is it Giant? Shimano? They could be looking at each other. BMC also could be looking at each other here. So he might be, gain the advantage here and put out a couple of more seconds, as we can see gaps here on the descent. But I think it will be come together very quickly. I also see Philippe Gilbert very much in the front there as they went over the top of the Poggio.
Philippe Gilbert, we've been expecting a little bit of activity from Philippe Gilbert of the BMC squad. Yet to take victory in Milan Sanremo, but believes that he's coming back to decent form. Vincenzo Nibali certainly not being hindered by those motorbikes in front of him. If anything, I think they could be offering him a little bit of aerodynamic advantage, which would be disappointing for the other director sportif in the group behind, as he settles into the aerodynamic tug. The winner of the Vuelta España in 2010, the winner of Giro d'Italia 1 year ago, the winner of Treno Adriatico in 13 and 12. Cilingi behind, Mark Demar behind him. Those riders very shortly to be mopped up by the group. Great strength being displayed by Martin Cilingi. Great perseverance, great endurance. And is that Greipel? No, it looks like it's an attack off the front of the group. And this has ignited the blue touch paper in that group behind, because they're not going to let another solo attacker go too easily. Oh, they're looking behind themselves at a crucial moment. So little groups tipping off the front, and this could be a very, very significant moment as Cannondale are involved. So too Trek, that's got to be Cancellara on the left. Is that Sagan on the front of that group? Team Europcar have Alexander Pichot in there, I do believe. And that's got to be shut down very quickly, and not surprisingly, an immediate reaction from the riders behind, but not much more than 30 riders in there at the moment.
No, we can see there, and it looked like a Omega Pharma Quick-Step rider. It looked like Stybar actually, and I'd not be surprised, as we can see that he's sitting in 5th position at the moment. His descending would be very good, but again, you know, a lot of gaps appearing, but it's coming back together once again here, and I think there's going to be you know, a regrouping here, but at the moment it's Omega Pharma who are taking up the chase. Cannondale also involved BMC, so that tells all their favourites are in here.
Nice move it was from Zdeněk Stybar, and would make a lot of sense, wouldn't it? The world cyclocross champion would not be afraid of a descent in the wet. I'll tell you what, this man is coming with a big one-day classic win very shortly. I can feel it in my bones. Will it be Milan Sanremo? Indeed, Paris-Roubaix. He owes that race something after his performance last year, taken down by a spectator. But Stybar, that was the first time that he was announced as a really big contender in road racing, and he's absolutely flying at the moment. Another man that's flying and doing a wonderful job today is Alessandro De Marchi. Still has good legs, checks over his shoulder, makes sure that the group is together, and that his teammate Peter Sagan quite a bit down the line at the moment, but I feel confident that Sagan is in there. Andrei Greipel is in there. 25 seconds between Martin Cilingi and Vincenzo Nibali, and this group a little bit further back than that, so yeah, about 50 seconds between the leader and the peloton. 45 seconds according to Radio Tour at the moment, and Nibali piling on the pressure and in with a racer's chance of making this one last, Sean.
Yes, well, he is, you know, giving it everything here, and he has to just commit himself now. And if he gets to the Poggio, you know, with that advantage of 45, 50 seconds, again, he could maybe hold on. All depends what he's got left in the tank, first of all. But again, we can see De Marchi who is pushing on here, and there's quite a few other teams just close in contention, as we have a group of, what, about 25 riders.
Well, there's a lot of riders are satisfied with the pace that De Marchi is setting. Superb performance from him. He has them strung out. As Andrei Greipel dispenses with his rain jacket and reveals the colours of the national champion in the road race of Germany, a title that he won last June. Meanwhile, the gap is coming down ever so slightly between Nibali and the group behind, but still a strong advantage at the moment. Martin Cilingi also going well as can be expected for a man that's been out front as long as he had. The big Dutchman, 36 years of age, and the cold doesn't get into his bones like it does into other riders. Superb performance today, been out front all day and still managing to hold off the big group behind, and perhaps I think a little frustrated that he wasn't able to stay with Nibali on the descent. Andrei Greipel looking very good. Looking very strong indeed, and there's been so much talk about Mark Cavendish, but what about Greipel?
Yes, I think it's a good sign to see him there, and we can see Bosenhagen as well. A lot of riders starting to appear here. When you see the riders at the front of the group after coming down off the Cipressa, it means that they got up the Cipressa quite to the front of the group, because you cannot make up much ground on the descent of the Cipressa. And we can see Van Avermaet is also very much in contention there, but he is just riding on the front, not really pushing on at the moment, not panicking, and on the Poggio there's going to be some fireworks.
Saw Johan Alfredo in there at the back of the group. He was 7th in this race in 2011. It's clearly a race that he likes. The Frenchman with Française de Jeu. Didn't quite get to see if Arnaud Demar was in there, the sprint sensation of France, and a man capable of coming up with a big result. Of course, questions for Edvald Boasson-Hagen. He's likely to be active on the Poggio. We've seen it from him in the past, Sean, but you have to believe that he won't be confident of his sprinting skills against the likes of Greipel and Cavendish, and that he's got to get involved in some of the activity on the Poggio.
Well, I think first of all, when you get to the Poggio, you see what happened, what the other big favourites are doing, and if there's a lot of attacks, well then you just try and follow, because the sprinters, I think they will have difficulty if there's a lot of explosive attacks on the very beginning of the Poggio. Then the likes of Bose and Hag will say, well, if I can follow here, I'm one of the better sprinters to hang in here. And it all depends how good you are as well. If you're really feeling good, well then you can also try going and attack.
Cavendish safely in there, nestled in the middle of the group. A few bike riders in front of him. Peter Sagan, as Vincenzo Nibali receives the cheers of the crowd that have persevered and have braved the inclement weather conditions as he launches himself onto the Poggio, the final climb of the day, and the big opportunity for Vincenzo Nibali. Needs to have a decent advantage across the top of this. When they reach the top of the Poggio, which is a total of 3.7 kilometers in length, they'll have just a tad over 6 kilometers left in the bike race. Just 3.7% average, maximum of 8%. Doesn't sound like a whole lot, but I tell you what, it's going to feel absolutely hellish to those riders, bearing in mind how long they've been out. Cilingi still hanging on in front of the group, and this really is a wonderful performance, and I do indeed hope that he's manages to tag on to the group heading to the line. Now the attacks are going to come from Peter Sagan. Philippe Gilbert shaping up for a big one as well. And Ben Swift ready to launch Edvald Boas and Hagen. Cilingi about to be mopped up. And the Belkin team can be proud of his performance today. Wonder is Bauke Mollema, perhaps Les Peter Nordhaug, have they managed to hang on in that group? Not too many Belkin jerseys visible. Vincenzo Nibali, though, looking very strong indeed at the moment. Doesn't look as if the long miles are taking anything out of him, anything significant out of him at the moment. He still has decent form. And Gerald Cielek still in good shape as well. Wearing Dossard #1, the reigning champion. He says, I'm not a bunch sprinter. Well, that's how he was billed and characterized early in his career when he took German national championship ahead of Eric Zabel, the man who made this race his own once upon a time. But Cielek disappeared for a couple of years, dropped down to a team in pro-continental level, and then went out and won Milan Sanremo last year and showed the seriousness of the intent from MTN Quebec. First African team to produce a winner of a Monument Classic. And now 26 seconds to the group behind for Vincenzo Nibali.
And we can see it's the Sky team who are taking it up at the moment on the front of this group of favourites. Salvatore Puccio is on the front at the moment. We see Ben Swift also there, and Aldred Bosenhagen, of course, not too far off. Van Avermaet from BMC very much to the front here, and as we can see, Lotto Belisol also with some riders here hovering around the front, and they're all just holding off at the moment. They can feel, or they probably make the calculation, 24-25 seconds on advantage for Nibali. That's controllable on the Poggio.
So approaching the Poggio now. The lower slopes have been reached by Vincenzo Nibali with 22 seconds advantage. Mark Cavendish within the first 15 riders or so. Similarly, Andre Greipel looking very strong indeed. Degenkolb is in there. And this is a good effort by the Sky Pro Cycling squad, with Puccio doing great work. Ben Swift too. Has Edvald Bosenhagen got what's necessary? The rain jackets being cast off left and right. A lot of Belisol riders in red on the right-hand side of the road, looking to get organised, as they've got Andre Greipel in the white jersey. A little bit further back, Trek Factory Racing. No doubt we're going to see the big launch coming up very shortly from Fabian Cancellara. Now we turn right and onto the Poggio proper for Vincenzo Nibali. It's been rising a little bit on the way to it, but this is the Poggio proper as we launch ourselves up the final climb of the day. 3.7% average, as I said, maximum of 8%, and it's going to feel very, very difficult indeed for Vincenzo Nibali. What sort of a gear can he hang on to and get on top of as they pile himself up then? He's only got 11 seconds, Sean. Would you care to speculate at this moment?
Well, I think it's game over pretty shortly for Nibali. We can see here, you know, there's a lot of movement on the front of the bunch, and you know, the first attack, I think Nibali will be closed down very quickly. As you can see, he's coming down to 8 seconds inside the 10 kilometers to go. You know, there's the riders now with the sprinters. They are going to try and keep, you know, a good strong pace on the front of the group, and the riders who do not want to go to the finish, they are going to try and go in the attack. And who will be the first one? Philippe Gilbert, I think, you know, he's going to be concerned. So we see Van Avermaet there. They are certainly going to try and do something, because they have to really put the sprinters in difficulty.
A brave, a valiant effort from Vincenzo Nibali, but it's all for nothing. Well, not for nothing. It was a wonderful effort, and fair play to him for trying it. But Vincenzo Nibali has been dragged back to the group. Lotto Belisol doing the finishing work. Trek Factory Racing looking to set up Fabian Cancellara. And if you were to bet, well, the attack's already starting to come. I was going to say, what's the best point on the Poggio to attack? The softener uppers are happening already. Is this Cancellara? No. Vincenzo Nibali is called to account. I think it's Rast from Trek Factory Racing that has drilled it off the front and is trying to set something up for Fabian Cancellara. This a nice card to play for Trek Factory Racing as Rast charges off the front and gets a significant advantage. When is the best time to go, Sean?
Well, I think it's probably a little bit early yet if you're thinking of going all the way to the finish. We can see the Trek Factory with Rash. They're probably just trying to set it up, make it difficult for everybody, and in that case Cancellara can, you know, put in an attack in that final 1500 metres of the climb.
Now who's this coming across? Cannondale look to try and put a rider up there as well. Or is it Bardiani Valvoli? Could it be Colbrelli? Yep, it's definitely a Bardiani Valvoli rider. Has a little look behind. Rast has nothing to offer there. The group behind satisfied that that's not a rider they need to worry about. So this very brave move. Great to see this team. It's Battaglin, Enrico Battaglin. Took a great stage victory in Giro d'Italia last year. Almost running a little bit wide on that corner, and that allows Rast to get back onto his wheels. So he lost a couple of seconds there. So Enrico Battaglin has decided to pitch for glory here in Milan Sanremo within the final 10 kilometers. A dangerous one as all the favourites look at each other. Are they going to let this one go to the line? Surely not.
No, I don't think the sprinters will want that, but we can see Lotto Belisol are doing their best here at the moment with Greipel in second position. And of course, you know, the sprinters teams are not going to try and follow the attack of Battagling. They're just going to keep making a strong pace on the front, because if you do doubt your sprinters, you're going to put them in the red very quickly. But Battagling putting in a real, you know, strong attack here.
Nibali's gone. Great effort at the back of the group. And Ronaldo Noscentini too. No longer involved in the big way. I wonder, will Nibali try to drag himself back up onto the group? Noscentini showing a little bit less enthusiasm. Nibali has played his card. Turned out not to be the winning one. 20 seconds advantage now for Battaglin and Rast up front. Rast, the Swiss rider with Trek Factory Racing, trying to set something up for his Swiss teammate Fabian Cancellara. At the moment, the other teams are not biting. Is this Puccio again on the front for Sky Pro Cycling? Taking responsibility for closing this one down. They can't afford to mess, because 6.1 kilometre from the line will be the point at which they reach the top of this hill. So just 1.5 kilometres to go on the Poggio. And it goes up in a series of ramps, Sean.
Yes, it certainly does, and we're in the section now where it's a little bit easier, then it kicks up again as you get closer to the top, and we can see it's battling who's the one who's pushing on here. And on the front of the bunch, it's Sky who are setting the pace. It was Puccio, but also Ben Swift was very close there, so they're the ones who are controlling pace on the front of the group. But any moment I think there will be somebody of the favourites who do not want to allow this one to get to a sprint, has to go in the attack.
Well, the spectators at the side of the road watching with interest and wondering who those two riders on the front, and Gilbert has decided to go for it in a big way, and Gilbert is launching himself off the front. For how much longer will he be allowed? Daniele Benatti has seen the danger and looks to react. Daniele Benatti, the Italian, good sprinter. As Philippe Gilbert launches himself off the front a couple of years ago, he would have disappeared into the distance, but he immediately closes down Rast and Battaglin on the front. So brave effort comes to nothing for those two riders. They don't quite get to the top of the Poggio with the important advantage, and here comes another one, and it's got to come from Belkin. Well, just closed down just at the crucial moment there. Was it Lars Peter Nordhaug? Nordhaug looks to do something. Katusha also. That's got to be Paolini. Who else with those with that characteristic stocky figure, and of course the
hot tea worked.
The hot tea obviously got those hands warming up. The legs are warming up. I think every part of everyone's body is pretty warm at the moment on this final climb of the Poggio. Paolini on the front drills it for Katusha. His attack not proving effective enough, but he'll keep it going as long as he can to make it as difficult as possible for other riders behind. And other riders behind include one or two riders from Sky. Was that Boasson Hagen at the back of the group that seemed to be suffering? That's bad news for him, because he needs to be in great form at the Poggio to try and shake off the sprinters. What other sprinters are managing to survive this onslaught as Lars Peter Nordhaug goes for a big one? They reach the top of the Poggio. Now the descent to come. A few bike lengths advantage and an opportunity for the suicide descenders to really go for it in a big way and drill it down this extremely technical descent, as we see riders desperate to try and cling back on. And I wonder, was that Andre Greipel at the back of the group there? There was a rider in white just a little bit off the back, but well within his compass to try and get back on this descent. So it looks like we could well have a big group going to the finish, but that's to count without the intentions of Lars Peter Nordhaug at the front. I'm assuming it's Nordhaug. Could that be Van Avermaet with him?
Yes, it's definitely Van Avermaet.
One way or another, I'm not sure they're going to have enough, because they need to really committed descending now. Is that Cavendish sitting fifth or sixth rider in line? If it is, it's an absolutely wonderful performance. We'll wait for confirmation of that, but one or two white jerseys in there. We're hearing that Greipel is a little bit off the back, so I think that might have been Greipel that was, what, 5 or 6 seconds off the back on the top of the climb and desperate to try and get back on. So it is Bauke Mollema, actually. Bauke Mollema of Team Belkin. Bauke Mollema, the Dutch all-rounder, general classification rider, did a great ride in last year's Tour de France and is doing a wonderful ride in Milan Sanremo as the riders are scrabbling to get back into contention here, and teammates working to desperately close down. It is Van Avermaet for BMC. Very tight into that hairpin. Sean, this is a descent that you know well, and it's very complicated, isn't it?
Yes, well, we can see, they're really tight at the corners, and we can see the riders, they have to knock off the pace a lot, but still, any little bit of correction at all in the corner and you can slide off very quickly. And we can see, it's Nordhaug who is pushing on the pace, Mollema, sorry, is pushing on the pace here. It's ahead of Van Avermaet.
So Bauke Mollema on the front for Team Falcon. Greg Van Avermaet on his wheel. Daniele Bernardi in there for Tinkoff Saxo. Swift and Poggio have been going very well for Sky Pro Cycling. Although Boasson-Hagen, their teammate that they might have expected to be in better form, looks like he's struggling on the back of that group. And the group are in one long line as they make their way down this final descent. When they get to the finish of the Poggio, they'll just have 2.5 kilometers to go to the finish of this race. Another kilometer of downhill riding before they get to the level surface and arrive into the streets of Sanremo, and then they'll race towards the Lungomare Italo Calvino. And who is going to stretch their hands aloft as victor of Milan Sanremo 2014? This is the site of the final kilometer. Sitting 3.5 kilometers. Now Van Avermaet goes. Realizes the desperate situation that he's in and needs to get off the front, has a little look over his shoulder and realizes that all that's done is stretch this group into one long line, but the elastic hasn't broken yet. A few little technical right-handers close to the finish of this stage, but that's all to come very shortly. Van Avermaet on the front of the group though, setting a pace, and it's a big group heading towards the line.
Yes, it is a big group. There's a lot of riders just starting to make contact into this leading group, as we can see here. There's a long line of riders as Bauke Mollema goes in the attack once again.
Yeah, and one of the Bardiani Valvole riders, could it be Battaglin again that's recovered from that, or Colbrelli perhaps, who's in good form at the moment. Bardiani Valvole looking to react to that, but that's a decent, well, I was going to say it was a decent advantage that Mollema had, but it was actually the Bardiani Valvole rider that piles it on and manages to get a bit of an advantage. Garmin Sharp go to the front to try and close things down. Riders trying for these little opportunistic late efforts, but are there enough teammates there to close this one down?
Well, I think there's a lot of riders coming back here, and you know, some teams have a number of riders, so at the moment for a rider to do it alone here is going to be real difficult. As we can see, we have, what, 20 plus riders.
Yeah, and plenty of teammates in there. It is Colbrelli of Bardiani Valvole. He's in good form at the moment and has a little look under his shoulder, has a look under one armpit, then the other, realizes that they've given him a little bit of a gap, but now Amiga Pharma Quickstep go to the front to shut this one down. Brave effort from Colbrelli. Bardiani Valvole, not in the World Tour, but a team that always lights up the race whenever they get a chance. So the Luca Paolini for Katusha trying to set things up for Kristoff. And Greipel has managed to get back to the group. What's that taken out of him? He's just about ready to latch on the German national road race champion. There's another little effort goes on the front, so that's, and there comes the stall. So Greipel is in the group and safely in there, but what sort of legs has he got left for a sprint? Mark Cavendish is in there too, we do believe.
Yes, Cavendish is in there, and we see Omega Pharma pushing on there. It was Stoiber who was setting the pace on the front. Greipel getting back in there just inside the 1.4 kilometers to go. Has he made, you know, a big effort as he starts to try and move up here? And we can see Katusha were the ones who are, you know, setting the pace on the front.
Yeah, Mark Cavendish moving up the line as well. So I'm in about 15th position, maybe 12th, 15th, something like that at the moment. Katusha decide to take things up. Perhaps they realise that André Greipel is suffering at the back of the group and they don't want to let him recover at all. They don't want any of the sprinters to recover because Kristoff looks in good shape. Paolini certainly looks in good shape. We're under the kite inside the final kilometre in Milan Sanremo of 2014. Gerard Zielek is sitting there 4th or 5th position too. So too is Peter Sagan. Fabian Cancellara. Surely the late attack is coming. We haven't seen anything from Cancellara. Surely he's not going to try and sprint it out with these guys. Philippe Gilbert, is it to the front? Is he trying to set something up or go on a lone late attack? Is it possible through this technical left-right section? A little look over his shoulder. Oh, there's a crash. Someone's down at the back of the group. Looked like someone, was it one of the Belkins or perhaps a Cannondale? Maybe a Bardiani rider. Looked like a rider in green. Mark Cavendish looks in good shape on the right-hand side of the road and clearly has the legs and has the desire. Fabian Cancellara also in the group as they look to launch one. Going for the line. It's BMC. Greg Van Avermaet goes on the right-hand side. Here comes Cavendish on the left. What has he got left? Sasha Modelo is that in the middle of the group for Lamprey. And the tired legs sprinting to the line. After 300 kilometres of racing, it's Alexander Kristoff that's going to get it for Katusha. Kristoff gets it for the Katusha squad. Wonderful job done by his team all day long. And he's converted that. Not too many talked about him ahead of this race. 8th in 2013. That is victory for Alexander Kristoff in the Milan Sanremo of 2014. Wonderful, powerful effort. Mark Cavendish just hadn't quite got the legs. Fantastic effort from the 2009 champion, but no denying Alexander Kristoff, who takes the victory in Milan Sanremo of 2014. Fantastic performance and wonderful teamwork by the Katusha squad.
Yes, well, we see Paolini doing a great job, and what a sprint there. We could see Cavendish, taking it up, but Kristoff just that little bit too strong, and it was a real fight to get to the line. Of course, the conditions, the distance, all of that, it just it tells. And when you make the effort to hang in on Cipressa, Poggio, we can see Cavendish here at the moment. He had to correct at a moment, and that probably cost him a little bit because he had to come from a little bit far off. But it looked like Ben Swift from the Sky team, who maybe got second there with Cavendish third.
Well, great effort from the British riders, but look at the way Kristoff, when he launches himself, I think that was Modelo that had gone for a big one from Lampre, but he had bike lengths advantage, and is it no, it's actually Cancellara in second position. Disappointment for him. Cancellara gambled everything on a sprint finish. He believed that he would have the strong legs at the end. He certainly did, enough to hold off the likes of Swift, Cavendish, and many other great sprinters. Gerald Cielek in there as well, but not enough to even get close to Alexander Kristoff, who takes a maiden victory in Milan Sanremo, the biggest victory of his career. A superb success for the Katusha rider. Oh, frustration for Cancellara. He's been a victor in this race before, but how often has he been the bridesmaid? It's so difficult for him with his talent, lacking the big sprint though. Alexander Kristoff takes the victory, gets his arms in the air. It's been a long, hard slog in the saddle for the riders today. Racing through driving rain for much of the day in Cancellara. It's his salute in second place. His salute of frustration, I think, more emphatic even than the victory salute of Alexander Kristoff.
Yes, well, he got a good opening and got a run at it, and of course, far too late. Kristoff, when we see the side-on shot there, 3 bike lengths at least back to Cancellara, with Swifty in third place. I think again we look at the sprint, the big sprinters, the ones who can get up the climbs better, and Kristoff is one who can climb that little better. I think Mark Cavendish making the effort. Also we see Greipel coming back there, but no in the sprint because of the late effort.
But I know you were confident beforehand. How do you feel?
I feel great. It was a fantastic victory, and Luca helped me a lot in the final, and yeah, I didn't really believe it when I crossed the line that I won Sanremo. I was hoping maybe for a top 10 finish, and to win is incredible.
How were you feeling when you saw Cavendish and Greipel still in the group?
I thought I would have the difficulty is to beat them, but a sprint after 300k is different than after 200k, so normally I don't lose so much power even if it's long, so yeah, I was trying for the win, and I was happy that I could take it.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's the
allora per qualche istante daremo inizio alle premiazioni finali di questa bella edizione. Intanto ricordiamo prima posizione per Alexander Kristoff, al secondo posto si è classificato Fabio Cancellara, e in terza posizione
So Alexander Kristoff takes victory in this year's first big classic of the season. Arrives into Sanremo at the front of big group. Third in the Olympic Games road race in the past. Stage in Tour of Switzerland, no doubt about it though. This is the biggest victory of the 26-year-old career. League rider from Norway. This is a launching pad, I think, for his career, and now the sky's the limit for him. He'll bask in the glory of this one for a little while longer. Frustration for Fabian Cancellara. Great performance from Ben Swift, so congratulations to him. Lobato getting up for fourth for Movistar, a bit of a surprise. Disappointment for Mark Cavendish. Great, valiant effort from the Amiga Pharma Quick-Step man. Colbrelli, what a great effort from him after his late attack to get up for sixth. Stybar Modelo Zielek and Peter Sagan, everybody's pre-race favourite, back in 10th place. But no doubt about who took the victory. It was Alexander Kristoff, winner of Milan Sanremo 2014.